Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
They say money changes people, but sometimes it just reveals who they truly are. Today, we follow an arrogant woman who dumped her low-income husband for a wealthy CEO, completely unaware that her broke husband was the anonymous investor funding her entire empire. When the truth is finally revealed behind closed boardroom doors, the karma is swift, brutal, and absolutely perfect. Here we go. If you looked at me on a Tuesday afternoon, you would see a profoundly uninteresting man. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I wore faded gray sweatpants, comfortable worn-out sneakers, and a plain black t-shirt. I spent my days sitting at a modest oak desk in the corner of a middle-class apartment in Chicago, typing away on a laptop as a freelance copy editor. I cooked the meals, I scrubbed the floors, and I did the laundry. To the outside world, and to my own wife, I was a man with zero ambition. A comfortable, lazy underachiever. What the world didn't and oppose. Tino, and what my wife absolutely could not know, was that Arthur Pendleton, the freelance editor, was a carefully constructed disguise. In reality, I am the sole heir and managing director of Obsidian Holdings, an incredibly secretive, multi-billion-dollar private equity firm based out of Switzerland. I inherited the empire from my late grandfather, a ruthless industrialist who taught me one vital, brutal lesson before he died. Money is a parasite. It attracts people who will love your wallet but will happily watch your soul bleed to death. I wanted a life free of gold diggers. I wanted a woman who would love me for my quiet nature, my loyalty, and my heart, not for my offshore bank accounts. So, I hid my wealth behind layers of ironclad blind trusts and corporate proxies. I lived on a strict, modest budget, and for a time my plan worked perfectly. I met Isabella at a small coffee shop in the rain. She was brilliant, fiercely passionate, and staggeringly beautiful. She was an entry-level marketing assistant with massive dreams. We fell in love in cheap diners and on long walks through public parks. When I proposed to her with a modest, lab-grown diamond, she wept with genuine joy. I thought I had successfully beaten the curse of my grandfather and Apo's wealth. I thought I had found the holy grail, unconditional love. I had no idea that the very ambition I admired in her would eventually mutate into the poison that would destroy our marriage. 3 years into our marriage, Isabella's ambition hit a brick wall. She had developed a brilliant concept for a company called Aura, a high-end, AI-driven logistics and lifestyle brand that catered to the ultra-wealthy. Her business plan was flawless. Her market research was impeccable. But she lacked the one thing every startup needs: massive initial capital. She needed $5 million just to build the prototype and secure the supply chain. For 6 grueling months, Isabella flew across the country, pitching Aura to dozens of venture capital firms in Silicon Valley and New York. And for 6 months, she was ruthlessly rejected. The venture capitalists dismissed her. They told her she was too young, too inexperienced, and that her valuation was a fantasy. I watched the light slowly die in her eyes. The passionate, fiery woman I loved was returning home to our modest apartment every night, kicking off her heels, and collapsing onto the sofa in tears of profound defeat. They dawn and Apos. Respect me, Arthur, she sobbed one evening, her head resting on my chest as I stroked her hair. They look at me like I and Apos am just a silly little girl playing business. I know Aura can change the market. I just need someone to believe in me. It broke my heart. I loved her so deeply that seeing her in pain was physical agony for me. I wanted to give her the world. I wanted to see her soar. But I couldn't in Apos. Just write her a check for $5 million. If I did, the illusion of Arthur, the humble copy editor, would shatter. She would realize I had lied to her for years, and the unconditional love I so desperately guarded might be tainted by the revelation of my extreme wealth. So I made a decision. I would give her the wings she needed to fly, but I would remain completely invisible in the shadows. The execution had to be legally flawless. I traveled to a secure location, booted up my encrypted terminal, and contacted my lead proxy attorney in Geneva, a ruthless legal shark named Marcus Vance. Marcus, I instructed over the secure line. I am wiring $5 million into a newly formed dummy corporation under the Obsidian umbrella. Reach out to a startup in Chicago called Aura. Tell the founder that your anonymous European clients are deeply impressed by her business model and want to fully fund her seed round. Understood, Mr. Pendleton, Marcus replied smoothly. What are the equity terms? Standard hostile protection, I said coldly. We provide the full $5 million, but the anonymous trust retains 80% majority ownership and total voting control of the board. She will serve as founder and president, but she operates at the pleasure of the board. Ensure the NDA is ironclad. She is never to know my identity. 2 days later, Isabella was sitting at our small kitchen table, staring blankly at a pile of rejection letters, when her phone rang. I stood by the stove, stirring a pot of pasta, watching her from the corner of my eye. She answered the call. I watched her expression shift from exhaustion to confusion to absolute, breathless shock. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Yes, Mr. Vance. I accept the terms. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank your clients for believing in me. She screamed into the phone. She dropped the phone, ran across the kitchen, and leaped into my arms, sobbing with euphoric joy. Arthur, an anonymous European firm just funded Aura. $5 million. They loved my pitch. I did it. We and Oppos. We're going to be rich. I held her tightly, burying my face in her shoulder, smiling a quiet, deeply satisfied smile. I always knew you were brilliant, Bella, I whispered. I and Oppos am so proud of you. I had given my wife her dream. I thought I had solidified our future. I didn't and Oppos. T realized I had just financed my own execution. Money changes people, but it doesn't and Oppos. T create new flaws. It simply acts as a magnifying glass, exposing the arrogance and greed that were always hiding beneath the surface. Within 2 years, Aura exploded. The AI logistics model disrupted the market exactly as Isabella had predicted. The company's valuation skyrocketed from $5 million to over $50 million. As Aura grew, Isabella's transformation was terrifyingly rapid. The sweet, grounded woman who loved cheap diners vanished. She was replaced by a cold, calculating CEO draped in Prada, carrying Hermes bags that cost more than a car. She moved her office to a massive glass skyscraper downtown. But the most significant change wasn't in Oppos. Her wardrobe. It was the man she hired to be her chief executive officer, Julian Cross. Julian was a quintessential tech bro. He was tall, aggressively handsome, wore perfectly tailored suits without a tie, and possessed a slick, arrogant charm. He was brought in to handle the aggressive expansion, and he quickly became Isabella and Oppos' shadow. They were always together. Business dinners, networking galas, emergency strategy sessions. And as Isabella and Oppos' status elevated, her view of me plummeted into the abyss. Because I was still playing the role of the humble, work-from-home editor, she began to see me not as her rock, but as an anchor dragging her down. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped eating the dinners I cooked. When her high society friends asked what her husband did, she would visibly cringe and quickly change the subject, deeply embarrassed by my lack of corporate prestige. Arthur, please, she snapped one morning, adjusting her diamond earrings in the mirror while I poured her coffee. Don and Oppos. Wear those disgusting sweatpants when Julian comes over to pick me up today. Try to look like you have some self-respect. You and Oppos. Embarrassing me. I held the coffee pot, staring at the woman I had given everything to. The warmth in her eyes was completely dead, replaced by the icy glare of a superior looking at a servant. The true depth of my degradation crystallized on our 5th wedding anniversary. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing a massive romantic dinner. I bought expensive steaks, her favorite vintage of Pinot Noir, and lit candles all around our apartment. I was desperately trying to bridge the massive canyon that had opened between us. I wanted to remind her of the couple we used to be. At 8 p.m., the front door unlocked. Isabella didn't and Oppos. Walk in alone. She walked in laughing, her arm casually brushing against Julian Cross. Julian was wearing a bespoke navy suit, looking around my modest apartment with a thinly veiled smirk of absolute disdain. "Arthur, be a dear and grab us some glasses," Isabella commanded without even looking at me. She didn't and Oppose. T acknowledged the candles. She didn't and Oppose. T acknowledged the smell of the steaks. She didn't and Oppose. T say and Oppose. "Happy anniversary." "And Oppose, Isabella," I said softly, my voice tight. "It and Oppose. Our anniversary." She froze, rolling her eyes in deep annoyance. "Oh, for God and Oppo's sake, Arthur, grow up. We are in the middle of closing a massive merger with a Japanese tech firm. Julian and I have a working dinner. I don't and Oppose. T have time for your little domestic fantasies right now. Put the food in the fridge and give us the dining table." Julian leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, looking at me with a sickeningly sweet smile. "Sorry, Artie. The corporate world doesn't and Oppose. T sleep. But hey, it smells great. You make a hell of a housewife." My jaw clenched. The urge to pick up the hot pan and smash it across his arrogant, perfectly sculpted face was overwhelming. But a forensic accountant and a private equity titan does not lose his temper. He calculates. I looked at Isabella. She wasn't and Oppose. T defending me. She was looking at me with irritation, waiting for me to obey her like a maid. "Of course," I said, my voice dead, completely devoid of emotion. "I and Oppose. Ella, leave you to your business." I cleared the anniversary dinner into the trash. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of my wife laughing with another man in the next room. The woman I loved was dead. The parasitic nature of money had infected her completely. She thought she was a titan of industry. She thought she was untouchable. She didn't and Oppose. T know that the humble, pathetic husband sitting in the dark bedroom literally owned 80% of her existence. The time for unconditional love was over. It was time to collect the debt. I didn't and Oppose. T need to hire a sleazy private investigator to confirm my wife was sleeping with another man. I owned the company she ran. I had absolute, unmitigated access to her corporate credit cards, her travel itineraries, and her expense reports. The morning after our ruined anniversary, while Isabella was at the office, I logged into the secure Obsidian Holdings server. I pulled the financial ledgers for Aura. It didn't and Oppose. T take long for a forensic financial mind to find the bloodstains. Under the guise of investor outreach, Isabella and Julian had been taking bi-weekly trips to New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. I pulled the hotel receipts. They weren't and Oppose. T booking separate suites. They were booking single, $5,000 a night penthouse suites, charging the champagne, the caviar, and the couples and Oppose massages directly to the company expense account. They were using my money to fund their affair. A lesser man would have confronted her. He would have screamed, thrown plates against the wall, and demanded answers. But I am the grandson of a ruthless industrialist. I knew that, in the game of absolute destruction, emotion is a liability. If I confronted her now, she would go on the defensive, hide assets, and prepare her lawyers. I needed her completely relaxed. I needed her to feel invincible. So I did the hardest thing a man can do. I swallowed my pride. When she came home that night, smelling faintly of Julian's expensive cologne, I didn't and Oppose. T say a word. I heated up her dinner. I asked her how her day was. I played the role of the blind, submissive, obedient husband to absolute perfection. I was tightening the noose, and she was happily putting it around her own neck. 3 weeks later, the executioner and Oppose block was finally dragged into the light. It was a Sunday morning. I was reading a book by the window when Isabella walked into the living room. She wasn't in Oppose. T wearing her weekend clothes. She was wearing a sharp, tailored business suit. She sat on the opposite sofa, her posture rigid, her eyes completely devoid of the warmth that had once made me fall in love with her. "Arthur, sit down," she commanded. It wasn't an Oppose. TA request. I put my book down. What is it, Bella? She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose as if she were dealing with a slow child. I and Appos, LL gets straight to the point. I and Appos, am filing for divorce. The words hung in the air, even though I knew it was coming. Hearing it spoken aloud by the woman I had built a company for still sent a cold shiver through my chest. Is there someone else? I asked, keeping my voice intentionally fragile and pathetic. Don and Appos. To be dramatic, Arthur. She scoffed, crossing her legs. This is about trajectory. My life is moving at the speed of light. I and Appos am running a $50 million company. I deal with global investors, senators, and elite executives. And you edit blog posts in your sweatpants. We have nothing in common anymore. You and Appos, and anchor Arthur. And I refuse to let you drag me down to your level of mediocrity. She reached into her designer briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, tossing them onto the coffee table. My lawyers drew these up, she continued, her tone icy and clinical. It's a standard dissolution. I am offering you a one-time lump sum of $50,000 and this apartment. In exchange, you waive any and all rights to Aura and my future earnings. It and Appos. More than generous, considering you contributed absolutely nothing to my success. Nothing to my success. The sheer, blinding arrogance of the statement almost made me laugh out loud. Before I could answer, the front door unlocked. Julian Cross walked in. He didn't an Appos. Knock. He had a key to my home. He walked up behind Isabella, casually resting his hands on her shoulders, looking at me with a sickeningly triumphant smirk. Listen, Artie, Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. Don and Appos, make this messy. Bella is about to take Aura to the next level. We Don and Appos, have time for a drawn-out, emotional court battle. Take the money, keep the apartment, and quietly bow out. It and Appos, the best deal a guy like you is ever going to get. I looked at the two of them. They looked like a magazine cover, the powerful CEO and her handsome, shark-like partner, standing over the pathetic, defeated husband. $50,000, I murmured, staring at the papers. And I just walk away? Sign the papers, Arthur, Isabella snapped, her patience gone. Don and Appos, forced me to litigate. If I unleash my corporate lawyers on you, they will bury you in legal fees until you and Appos, reliving on the streets. Take the deal. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. Not from sorrow, but from the immense physical effort required to suppress my smile. I signed my name on the dotted line. Isabella snatched the papers back immediately, letting out a heavy sigh of relief. Julian chuckled, tossing a $50 bill onto the coffee table. Have a few drinks on me tonight, Artie. You and Appos, LL bounced back. They walked out of my apartment, leaving the door wide open. They thought they had just flawlessly executed the perfect corporate divorce. They thought they had amputated the dead weight. They didn't and Appos. Tino, they had just handed the detonator back to the bomb maker. With the divorce finalized, Isabella and Julian no longer had to hide. They went highly public. They were featured on the cover of a prominent business magazine under the headline, "The Golden Couple of Tech, How Aura is Changing the World." In the interview, Isabella casually mentioned how she had to shed the dead weight of her past to achieve true greatness. But their true goal was and Appos, magazine covers. It was the initial public offering, IPO. Isabella and Julian were aggressively preparing to take Aura public on the New York Stock Exchange. Based on their projections, the IPO would value the company at over $200 million. As the founder and CEO, their minority equity stakes would instantly make them decamillionaires. There was only one hurdle left. According to the ironclad corporate bylaws Marcus Vance had drafted when I funded the company, an IPO could not proceed without the physical, in-person signature of the majority shareholder, the mysterious European board of Obsidian Holdings. For weeks, Isabella practically begged Marcus Vance to arrange the meeting. She was desperate to unlock her hundreds of millions of dollars. Finally, Marcus agreed. He instructed Isabella and Julian to fly to New York City and meet the board at the Obsidian Holdings private penthouse boardroom in Manhattan. The The stage was finally set. I packed a single overnight bag, left my dusty apartment, and boarded my private jet. The freelance copy editor was dead. The Titan was waking up. The Obsidian Holdings boardroom in Manhattan was a monument to absolute terrifying power. Located on the 80th floor, the room was entirely encased in floor-to-ceiling glass, overlooking the sprawling concrete jungle of the city. A massive, polished black marble table dominated the center of the room. Isabella and Julian arrived exactly on time. Through the one-way glass of my adjacent private office, I watched them. Isabella wore a stunning, aggressive red power suit. Julian wore a bespoke charcoal tuxedo jacket. They were holding hands, whispering excitedly to each other, looking around the multi-million-dollar boardroom with hungry, greedy eyes. They were completely intoxicated by the smell of impending wealth. Marcus Vance, my lead attorney, walked into the room. He wore a severe black suit and carried a thick leather portfolio. "Mr. Vance," Isabella said, standing up and flashing her most charismatic smile. "It and Appos, es an honor. Are your clients ready for us? The IPO documents just need the final majority signature. The managing director is ready to see you, Ms. Pendleton," Marcus said, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. He didn't an Appos. Shake her hand. Marcus turned toward the heavy mahogany double doors that led to my private office. "You may enter, sir." The heavy doors clicked open. I walked into the boardroom. I was an Appos, wearing faded sweatpants. I wore a custom-tailored, midnight blue Tom Ford suit. A Rolex Daytona rested on my wrist. My posture was perfectly straight, radiating a cold, crushing authority that silenced the room instantly. Isabella's charismatic smile froze. Julian's arrogant smirk melted off his face. For 5 agonizing seconds, they simply stared at me in pure, uncomprehending shock. Their brains could not process the visual data. Why was the pathetic, broke ex-husband walking out of the private office of a multi-billion-dollar Swiss equity firm? "Arthur?" Isabella breathed out, her voice trembling, her eyes darting between me and Marcus Vance. What are you doing here? Did you follow me?" "Security." I walked to the head of the black marble table. "I didn't an Appos. Sit down." I looked at the woman who had thrown me away like garbage, and the man who had mocked me in my own home. "No one is calling security, Isabella," I said smoothly, my voice echoing in the massive room. "Mr. Vance, please formally introduce me to my employees." Marcus Vance opened his portfolio. "Ms. Pendleton, Mr. Cross. Allow me to introduce Mr. Arthur Pendleton, the sole heir, managing director, and absolute owner of Obsidian Holdings, and by extension, the legal owner of 80% of your company." The color completely drained from Isabella and Appos' face. Her knees visibly buckled, and she collapsed back into her leather chair, her mouth opening in a silent scream as the devastating, world-ending reality finally crushed her. The ambush was perfectly executed. Now it was time for the slaughter. The silence in the penthouse boardroom was so absolute, so suffocating, that I could hear the faint ticking of my Rolex. Isabella sat frozen in her chair, her emerald eyes wide with a terror so profound it bordered on madness. Her brain was violently rewiring itself, desperately trying to reconcile the pathetic, sweatpants-wearing husband she had discarded with the ruthless billionaire standing at the head of the marble table. "The seed money," Isabella whispered, her voice cracking as the horrifying timeline finally clicked into place. "The $5 million. The anonymous European investors." "There were no European investors, Isabella," I said, my voice smooth and devoid of any sympathy. "It was just me, sitting in our tiny kitchen, watching you cry over your rejection letters. I believed in your dream when no one else in the world did. I built the stage and I gave you the microphone." Julian, finally recovering a fraction of his typical arrogance, stood up, leaning his palms flat against the marble table. "This is a bluff," he snarled, though a bead of sweat was visible on his perfectly groomed forehead. "This is some pathetic psychological game. Artie is a broke copy editor. You can an Appos. T. Just forge ownership documents, Vance. I and Oppos. I'll have my lawyers tear this apart. Marcus Vance didn't and Oppos. T. Even look at him. He simply slid a certified, heavily notarized corporate charter across the table. Julian snatched it. His eyes darted across the pages, reading the foundational financial architecture of the company he thought he ruled. He saw the wire transfer records. He saw the holding company structures. He saw my signature, the exact same signature that was on the $50,000 divorce settlement they had forced me to sign. Julian dropped the paper as if it were on fire. He stumbled back, bumping into the glass wall. It wasn't an Oppos. T.A. Bluff. The broke copy editor was the king. Panic began to set in, wild and frantic. Julian's arrogant, tech bro facade evaporated completely. Fine, Julian barked, trying to salvage his pride. You own the majority. Congratulations, Artie. But you still need us. We built the brand. We hold the client relationships. If you don an Oppos, T approve the IPO and give us our equity payouts today, Isabella and I walk. We and Oppos. I'll take the entire engineering team, start a rival firm and bleed Aura dry. I looked at Marcus Vance and nodded. Marcus opened his leather portfolio again. You aren't an Oppos. T walking anywhere, Mr. Cross, Marcus stated coldly. When Ms. Pendleton accepted the initial $5 million, she signed A and Oppos. Hostile protection and Oppos. Clause. Obsidian Holdings owns the intellectual property, the algorithms, and the brand name in perpetuity. Furthermore, you both signed non-compete agreements that legally bar you from working in the tech logistics sector for the next 10 years. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. But that and Oppos. That's not the reason the IPO is cancelled. I interrupted, stepping closer to the table. I audited your expense reports, Julian. I saw the $5,000 a night penthouse suites in Miami and New York. I saw the champagne. I saw the jewelry. Isabella flinched as if she had been physically struck. You used my company and Oppos' money to fund your affair with my wife, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. That is massive corporate embezzlement. It is a direct breach of your fiduciary duty to the board, and it gives me the legal right to terminate you both for cause. Terminated? Isabella gasped, the word tearing out of her throat. Arthur, you can and Oppos. T. Fire me. I am the founder. Aura is my life. You were the founder, I corrected her. Now you are a liability. The crushing reality of her situation finally broke through her arrogance. She had divorced a billionaire. She had thrown away a man who loved her unconditionally, a man who had secretly handed her the world. And she had done it for a sleazy, manipulative opportunist who was now staring at the floor in sheer terror. Isabella stood up, her eyes brimming with desperate tears. She walked around the table, reaching out to grab my arm. Arthur, please, she sobbed, the aggressive corporate CEO completely dissolving into a terrified, begging child. I was blind. The money, the power, it changed me. And Julian manipulated me. He convinced me you were holding me back. I never stopped loving you, Arthur. We can fix this. Just rip up the termination papers. I and Oppos, I'll fire Julian right now. It can just be you and me again. Julian's head snapped up. You treacherous bitch, he yelled. You were the one who wanted the divorce, so you wooed and Oppos. T have to split your IPO money with him. I looked down at Isabella's hands clutching my suit sleeve. I felt absolutely nothing. The love I once had for her had been surgically removed by her own cruelty. Do you remember the divorce settlement you forced me to sign? Isabella? I asked softly. She froze, looking up at me with tear-streaked mascara. You demanded I waive any and all rights to your future earnings and assets, I reminded her. You thought you were protecting your upcoming IPO millions from a broke husband. But what you actually did was sign a legally binding document waiving your right to any of my assets. You legally, permanently severed yourself from the Obsidian Empire. I gently, but firmly, peeled her hands off my suit. You played yourself, Bella. You built your own cage and you locked the door from the inside. Marcus Vance stepped forward, placing 2 single sheets of paper on the table. They Warren and Oppos, T multimillion-dollar IPO payouts. They were termination notices. Effective immediately, your employment at Aura is terminated, Marcus announced, his voice devoid of emotion. Because you are being fired for cause due to embezzlement, all of your unvested equity options are voided. You own 0% of the company. 0? Julian choked, gripping his hair. I have millions in pending options. I bought a penthouse on credit against that equity. If you void it, I and Oppos am bankrupt. Then I suggest you call a bankruptcy lawyer, I replied coldly. Furthermore, Obsidian Holdings is officially demanding immediate restitution for the $340,000 you embezzled through corporate expenses. If the funds are not wired back to the company accounts within 7 days, we will forward the evidence to the Manhattan District Attorney and press felony theft charges. They were utterly destroyed. I hadn't and Oppos. T just fired them. I had stripped them of their equity, legally barred them from working in their industry for a decade, and saddled them with a massive debt they had no way of paying. They were walking out of the building with less than they had when they met me. The heavy mahogany doors opened again. This time it wasn't an Oppos, T a lawyer. It was 4 massive, heavily armed private security contractors dressed in black. Please leave your corporate cell phones, your company laptops, and your corporate credit cards on the table, I instructed. Isabella's hands shook violently as she placed her diamond-encrusted phone and her platinum corporate card on the cold marble. Julian, entirely broken and defeated, tossed his keys and phone beside hers. Escort them to the service elevator, I told the head of security. Ensure they leave the premises immediately. If they attempt to return to the Aura headquarters in Chicago, have them arrested for trespassing. Arthur, please, Isabella screamed as the security guards grabbed her by the arms. You can and Oppos. T leave me with nothing. I and Oppos am your wife. Please. You were my wife, I corrected her, turning my back to them and looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling New York skyline. Now, you are just an unemployed stranger with a massive legal debt. Goodbye, Isabella. Julian didn't and Oppos. T fight. He let the guards drag him out, his eyes wide and hollow, staring into the terrifying void of his ruined future. The heavy doors clicked shut. The shouting faded away down the long corridor, leaving the boardroom in absolute, pristine silence. I stood by the glass, looking down at the tiny yellow cabs moving like ants on the streets below. The disguise was finally off. The parasite had been completely eradicated from my life. It was a cold victory, but as I adjusted my cuffs and walked back into my private office, I felt a profound, unbreakable peace. The ledger was officially closed. The drop from the 80th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper to the unforgiving concrete of the sidewalk is a violent psychological fall. Isabella and Julian stood on the busy New York street, the heavy doors of the Obsidian Holdings building locked firmly behind them. They had no corporate credit cards, no company phones, and no future. The afternoon sun felt cold. The shock was wearing off, and the terrifying reality of their $340,000 embezzlement debt was setting in. Isabella turned to Julian, her hands shaking, her breath ragged. Julian, what do we do? My personal accounts only have a few $1,000s. We have to hire a lawyer. We have to fight him. Julian didn't and Oppos. T looked at her with the passionate, supportive gaze he used when they were spending my money. He looked at her with pure, venomous disgust. Fight him with what, Isabella? Julian spat, his handsome face contorted in rage. He is a multi-billionaire private equity titan. He literally owns the paper your contracts were printed on. There is no fight. We are dead. But we have each other, Isabella pleaded, desperately reaching for his hand, trying to cling to the romantic fantasy she had destroyed her marriage for. We can start over. We and Oppos. Brilliant. Julian ripped his hand away as if she were diseased. He let out a harsh, cruel laugh. Start over? With you? You arrogant fool. I didn't in Oppos. T sleep with you because you were a genius. I slept with you because you were the CEO of a company about to IPO for $200 million. You were my lottery ticket. And now, thanks to your pathetic secret billionaire ex-husband, that ticket is worthless. Isabella physically recoiled, the words hitting her harder than a physical blow. I have my own debts to worry about, Julian snarled, hailing a yellow cab. Do not call me. Do not contact me. You are entirely on your own. He got into the cab and slammed the door, leaving the powerful CEO standing alone on the sidewalk, weeping as the crowds of busy New Yorkers pushed past her without a second glance. Isabella had to pawn her designer watch just to buy a coach class ticket back to Chicago. When she arrived at her luxury downtown penthouse, the one she had rented to project the image of a tech elite, the electronic keycard flashed red. The building management had already been notified that her corporate guarantor, Aura, had severed ties. Her personal credit cards were maxed out. She was locked out. Desperate, she sat in the lobby and pulled out her personal cell phone. She began calling the elite friends she had cultivated over the past 2 years. The venture capitalists, the socialites, the senators and oppos, wives. She thought her network would save her. The reality of high society is incredibly simple. They do not love you. They love your proximity to power. The moment Isabella explained she had been ousted from Aura and needed a place to stay, the tone of every phone call changed. Oh, Bella, that is just terrible. A wealthy socialite friend cooed through the phone. But, you see, my guest house is currently being renovated. I simply can and oppos. Host you. Good luck, darling. Click. Isabella, I and oppos. Love to help, but investing in a disgraced founder who was fired for cause is a massive liability for my firm. A venture capitalist told her coldly. Please Don and oppos. Call this number again. Click. By midnight, her phone battery died. She had called 40 people. Not a single one offered her a couch to sleep on. The illusion of her importance evaporated. She spent her first night as an independent woman sleeping sitting up in the lobby of her own apartment building, until the night concierge threatened to call the police to remove her. She was experiencing the exact same helpless, pathetic degradation she had forced upon me when she thought I was just a broke copy editor. While Isabella was discovering the bottom of the abyss, I was taking my rightful place at the summit. Monday morning, I walked into the sprawling, ultramodern headquarters of Aura in downtown Chicago. The entire company was in a state of terrified chaos. The news of the CEO and COO being fired by the mysterious majority shareholder had leaked. The employees thought a ruthless corporate liquidation was coming. I called an all-hands meeting in the main atrium. When I stepped up to the microphone, wearing my tailored suit, murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd. Some of the senior staff recognized me as Isabella and oppos. Boring, stay-at-home husband who occasionally dropped off her dry cleaning. Good morning, I said, my voice projecting calm authority. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I am the managing director of Obsidian Holdings, the majority shareholder of this company. I am also taking over as your permanent CEO. The room was dead silent. For the past 2 years, this company has been run on a culture of arrogance, superficiality, and fear. I continued. That ends today. We are not going to focus on magazine covers or expensive penthouse parties. We are going to focus on the product, the code, and the people who actually do the work. I looked into the crowd and spotted Elena. She was the chief operations officer, a brilliant, tireless woman who had actually kept the logistics algorithms running while Isabella and Julian were busy drinking champagne in Miami. Isabella had treated Elena like a glorified secretary, constantly taking credit for Elena and oppos' brilliant ideas. Elena, I said, pointing to her. Step up here. Nervously, she walked up to the podium. Effective immediately, Elena is the new president of Aura, I announced. She knows the logistics network better than anyone in this room. Your salaries are being increased by 20% across the board, funded by the cancellation of executive luxury stipends. Now let an oppos' get back to work and build an empire. The atrium erupted into deafening applause. I didn't and oppos' just take the company back. I instantly secured the absolute, unquestioning loyalty of every single employee. I wasn't an oppos' a tyrant. I was a liberator. Julian Cross, however, was not content to simply walk away into bankruptcy. He was a rat, and cornered rats will chew through the walls to survive. Julian had heavily mortgaged his future on the Aura IPO. He owed millions to private lenders, and without his unvested equity, those lenders were threatening severe physical consequences. He needed money, and he needed it fast. He thought he was smarter than the broke copy editor. During his time as CEO, Julian had secretly instructed a rogue engineer to install a hidden backdoor in the Aura client database. His plan was to remotely download the proprietary client list and the core AI algorithms and sell them on the black market to a rival Chinese logistics firm for a quick $10 million. On Wednesday night, at 2 a.m., my personal phone buzzed. It was an alert from the Obsidian cybersecurity grid. Julian was trying to breach the database from a cheap motel room outside the city. I didn't Oppose. T panic. I didn't Oppose. T shut the server down. I smiled. I opened my laptop and actively watched him bypass the outer firewalls. I let him download the files. I let him think he had won. What Julian didn't Oppose. Tino was that the moment I took over the company, I had my elite cybersecurity team completely sandbox his hidden backdoor. The files he was downloading weren't and Oppose. T the proprietary algorithms. They were highly sophisticated tracker files, embedded with digital watermarks and a script that automatically forwarded his IP address, MAC address, and location directly to the FBI and Oppose. Cybercrimes Division. He wasn't Oppose. T stealing data. He was downloading his own federal indictment. The 7-day deadline to repay the $340,000 in embezzled funds expired on Sunday at midnight. Neither Isabella nor Julian had wired the money. On Monday morning, the hammer fell. Julian was at Oppose, Hare International Airport, holding a one-way ticket to Macau, planning to sell the stolen data and disappear. As he handed his passport to the gate agent, 4 FBI agents in windbreakers quietly surrounded him. Julian Cross? The lead agent said, flashing a badge. You and Oppose, under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Hands behind your back. Julian screamed and fought, dropping his laptop bag, begging them to look at the data, claiming he was the real CEO. They dragged him through the crowded terminal in handcuffs, a humiliated, broken criminal. He was looking at 20 years in federal prison. As for Isabella, the FBI found her working a minimum wage shift at a suburban coffee shop. She was wearing a stained apron, her hair tied back, looking exhausted and thoroughly defeated. She was living in a cheap motel by the highway. The agents didn't Oppose. T arrest her in front of the customers. They pulled her into the manager and Oppose's office and presented her with a legal ultimatum drafted by Marcus Vance. Mr. Pendleton has offered a plea deal, the agent explained, placing a document on the desk. He will waive the criminal charges for the embezzlement, keeping you out of federal prison. In exchange, you will legally admit to the debt, and your wages will be garnished at 40% for the rest of your life until the $340,000 is repaid with interest. Sign it or we put you in handcuffs right now. Isabella looked at the paper. It was a life sentence of poverty. She would never be a CEO again. She would never wear Prada again. She would spend the next 30 years pouring coffee to pay back the money she stole from the husband she discarded. Tears silently rolled down her cheeks as she picked up the cheap plastic pen. She signed her name, her spirit finally, completely broken. The golden girl of tech was dead. The anonymous investor had won. 6 months after the boardroom purge, the financial world held its breath. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in New York City. The trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange was a sea of chaotic electric energy. I stood on the iconic balcony overlooking the massive digital screens, but I didn't Oppose. T stand alone. I had brought Elena, the new president of Aura, and 20 of the top logistics engineers who had actually written the code that made the company valuable. I wasn't Oppose. T wearing a flashy tuxedo. I wore a simple, impeccably tailored charcoal suit. I didn't Oppose. T need to project power. The market already knew exactly who I was. At exactly 9:30 a.m., Elena and I pressed the button. The massive brass bell rang out, echoing across the trading floor. The Aura initial public offering was officially live. We had priced the stock conservatively at $30 a share. But Wall Street knew that the toxic, inexperienced leadership had been excised and replaced by the ruthless, calculating backing of Obsidian Holdings. Within the first 10 minutes of trading, the stock surged to $50. By noon, it hit $80. When the market closed that afternoon, Aura was valued not at $200 million, as Isabella had dreamed, but at over $800 million. The engineers on the balcony wept and popped champagne. Because I had restructured the equity pool to reward the actual workers, dozens of them became millionaires that day. Elena hugged me, crying tears of genuine gratitude. I looked down at the cheering crowds on the trading floor. The victory was absolute. The company I had built in the shadows was now a titan of the industry. But as I took a sip of champagne, I realized something profound. The money didn't Inapos make my heart beat any faster. It was just numbers on a screen. The true victory wasn't and Apos the $800 million. The true victory was the complete eradication of the parasites who had tried to consume me. 1,000 miles away in suburban Chicago, the television above the counter of a dingy diner was tuned to a financial news network. Isabella was wearing a brown, grease-stained uniform, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She was carrying a plastic tub of dirty dishes back to the kitchen when the breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Aura IPO shatters expectations. Valued at $800 million under new CEO Arthur Pendleton. She stopped dead in her tracks. The plastic tub slipped from her hands, crashing to the linoleum floor, shattering plates and splashing dirty water onto her cheap, non-slip shoes. She stared at the screen. There I was, standing on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange, looking calm, powerful, and completely at peace. She watched the ticker tape scrolling at the bottom of the screen, showing the astronomical wealth that was now officially tied to my name. "Hey, Pendleton," the diner manager barked from the kitchen door. "Clean that mess up right now. And I and Apos am docking those broken plates from your paycheck." Isabella didn't and Apos argue. She couldn't and Apos She dropped to her knees on the wet, sticky floor, picking up the jagged pieces of broken ceramic with trembling, blistered hands. Her first paycheck from the diner had arrived that morning. After taxes and the brutal 40% federal wage garnishment she had agreed to, her take-home pay was less than $200 for a 50-hour workweek. She thought about the $5,000 a night penthouses. She thought about the Prada bags. She thought about the man who used to cook her warm dinners and rub her shoulders when she was stressed. The man she had thrown away because he wore sweatpants. Kneeling in the dirty dishwater. The crushing, inescapable gravity of her choices finally broke her mind. She didn't Inapos scream. She just put her face in her hands and wept, mourning the magnificent, limitless life she had burned to ashes. Julian Cross didn't and Apos get a wage garnishment. He got a reckoning. I didn't and Apos attend his sentencing hearing in federal court. I had absolutely no desire to look at his face ever again. But Marcus Vance sent me the official court transcript. Julian's high-priced defense attorneys had abandoned him the moment his bank accounts were frozen. Represented by an exhausted public defender, Julian tried to play the victim. He cried on the stand, blaming Isabella, blaming the toxic culture of tech startups, and blaming the predatory nature of Obsidian Holdings. The federal judge, a man who had zero tolerance for corporate espionage and black market data theft, cut him off mid-sentence. "Mr. Cross, you are not a victim," the judge stated. "You are an opportunistic predator who attempted to sell America and Apos' proprietary artificial intelligence to a foreign entity for personal enrichment. Your arrogance is only matched by your sheer incompetence." Julian was sentenced to 18 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. The TechBro CEO, the man who had walked into my apartment, eaten my food, and tossed a $50 bill at me while stealing my wife, was now a number in a concrete cell. He would lose his youth, his looks, and his mind behind bars. When I read the email from Marcus Vance, I didn't Inapos celebrate. I simply deleted the file, closed my laptop, and went for a walk in the park. With Aura running flawlessly under Elena and Apos' leadership, I stepped back into the shadows. I resigned as the public CEO, returning to my role as the invisible managing director of the trust. I bought a quiet, historic brownstone in Boston, far away from the toxic memories of Chicago. I didn't fill it with sports cars or servants. I filled it with thousands of books, vintage leather armchairs, and quiet jazz records. And surprisingly, I went back to work, not as a billionaire equity manager, but as Arthur the copy editor. I missed the simple, quiet satisfaction of helping authors fix their manuscripts. I began spending my afternoons at a small, independent bookstore down the street from my brownstone. The owner was a woman named Clara. She wore thick-rimmed glasses, had a warm, genuine laugh, and smelled like vanilla and old paper. For months, I was just Arthur, the regular who drinks black tea and reads in the corner. We started talking about literature, then about history, then about life. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the bookstore was empty. Clara brought a cup of tea to my table and sat across from me. "You know, Arthur," Clara smiled softly, resting her chin on her hand. "You and Appos, a very mysterious man. You edit books all day, you wear the same 3 gray sweaters, but you carry yourself like a man who has lived 100 lifetimes." I looked at her. Her eyes were kind, grounded, and completely devoid of the manic, ambitious greed that had infected Isabella. "I and Appos lived a few, Clara," I replied, taking a sip of the tea. "But I think I finally like the one I and Appos am living right now." A year later, Clara and I were sitting by the fireplace in my brownstone. The winter snow was falling heavily outside the window, blanketing the city in a peaceful, quiet white. She was curled up on the sofa, reading a manuscript, her head resting comfortably on my lap. I was gently running my fingers through her hair. Clara still didn't and Appos know the full extent of my wealth. She knew I was comfortable and that I owned the brownstone, but she didn't and Appos know about Obsidian Holdings. She didn't and Appos know about the private jets or the Swiss bank accounts. And she didn't and Appos care. When she looked at me, she didn't and Appos see a stepping stone. She didn't and Appos see a wallet. She saw a partner. She loved the man who cooked her dinner, who listened to her stories, and who held her when she was tired. My grandfather was right. Money is a parasite that attracts the worst kind of people. But it is also a crucible. It burns away the fakes, the users, and the arrogant opportunists, leaving only the undeniable truth behind. I had walked through the fire of betrayal. I had played the fool, survived the ambush, and executed the perfect, bloodless revenge. I had ripped my empire out of the hands of the unworthy. But as I looked down at Clara, sleeping peacefully by the fire, I realized my greatest victory was Appos the destruction of Isabella and Julian. My greatest victory was preserving my own soul. I hadn't Appos let their toxicity turn me into a monster. I closed my book, the firelight dancing across the leather cover. The anonymous investor had finally retired. The ledger was perfectly balanced, and for the first time in my life, my heart was truly, genuinely full.
I was a prisoner of the night, but now I see the morning light. No chains to hold me, no more fear. I'm flying high, crystal clear. They try to cage my endless soul, but now I'm free, now I'm whole. betrayals in